Thanks for joining us at FinovateSpring 2018. I'm David Penn, Research Analyst for the Finovate Group. Joining me this afternoon is Alex Jimenez. He's the VP Senior Strategist for Zions Bancorporation, and we got him hot off of a pair of panels that he did, so we're going to talk to him about more than one thing this afternoon. So thanks for joining us, Alex.
Thank you.
Yes. So first, just to give our viewers a little sense of who you are and what it is you do, could you give us sort of a brief bio of yourself, so to speak?
Sure. So I work at Zions Bancorp, and I manage our strategic planning process for technology, which means that I work with a lot of our business units to figure out what capability gaps we have and what do we need to do from a technology standpoint to close the gaps.
Okay, interesting. Now, we've kept you pretty busy today, from what I understand.
Yes, yeah.
You were doing a panel on innovations in payments, and then you were part of another panel talking about platformization. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about both.
Yep.
Let's start with the fresh one. You were just off of the platformization one.
Yes. Yep.
So could you give us a little bit of an idea of sort of what the conversation there was like, and maybe some of the better or more interesting takeaways from that conversation?
Well, actually, there was a lot of questions about what we meant by platforms.
Really? Well, great way to start.
So was it the technology behind it? Was it the customer experience that we were going after? Was it the extension of the bank to other vendors or fintech companies? We didn't quite resolve that.
Oh, really?
Some of us had more of thinking it was more of an architectural question as opposed to what kind of customer experiences we were working on. So we sort of didn't resolve that.
Really?
It was interesting.
Yes, and where do you fall on the discussion? For you, what is the platformization of banking? What does it mean, and why is it worth investigating?
I think banks can't be the everything for everyone. They need to figure out what value they bring, particularly in the future and in a digital world.
Sure.
And if you're going to be a platform like a Facebook, where you provide a place for finances, how do you extend products and services beyond just the basic stuff that you do? And how do you plug in with fintech companies or even some of your competitors to provide services? That's sort of the way I looked at platforms, although some of us were looking more of how we can break down the silos within the banks, within the bank, and just build a platform that's all together. So it was a little different. Right?
What's interesting about it is regardless of how, I say tomato, you say tomato, as far as that's concerned, there are both very, very important issues and important questions.
Yeah.
Taking the first end of that, the idea of the bank becoming the Facebook, I mean, that seems sort of like one of those nice work if you can get it type of situations. It's such a massive undertaking. Are banks really prepared to?
No, they're not. No. I think we're trying to look at industries where platforms have replaced the incumbents, and we're trying to figure out how is that going to impact financial services, and if so, then we need to be prepared to do that. Right. At the end of the day, banks will remain, but they might look very different. And so as we start looking at the journey of digital transformation and so on, that's sort of one of the ways that we as an industry are looking at it. Yeah. We're looking at what's going on in Europe with DSP2 and with open banking, where certain things are being mandated of banks, and in the U.S., there's no mandate, and there's unlikely to be a mandate. And so we may actually face that not from a mandate, but actually from market forces. And if the market dictates, then banks need to be prepared to do that. Right. And those banks that can't do it, then they could be in trouble.
Sure, sure. That's really fascinating. The idea, we just came from our show in London not too long ago, where a lot of the conversation, as you might imagine, was around GDPR and open banking, and it was just amazing from our perspective, even not thinking about the differences of just, wow, this is a real change that's happening to you, and everybody here is just geared up to deal with it. And then you go to the United States and you think about some of the same sorts of questions and issues, but not having that same, as you mentioned, regulatory driver. You think that market forces might be the thing that might help deliver that, perhaps?
Not sure. We'll see.
Right.
It could. The thing, those customers are not asking for that. Right. They don't understand it. And if you look at Europe, and when they ask customers about open banking, the vast majority of people in England don't know what that means.
Sure.
All the banks are freaking out, but the actual banking customers don't understand what it is. So time will tell, but if it does become something that European banks and other banks can actually use to fight American banks in our own market, then we're going to have to respond.
Right.
Or other American banks might say, hey, this is the way it's working and it's working well here, and import that here, and that could drive changes. So
yeah, that was one of the things I think was interesting, the possibility of domestic banks here in the U.S. being able to watch and see how it works, how it plays out, and pick and choose potentially from some of the elements.
I think that's a plus.
I agree with you on that one. Go at it.
And it may not work, so that's that. So.
Exactly. Well, let's briefly talk also about the other panel you were on, discussing innovations in payments.
Yep.
What were some of the, was there more consensus there than there was in the
Yes,
platforms?
there was, yeah.
Okay.
I think we talked a lot about the fact that innovation is happening very quickly, but mostly for those of us in payments, meaning that our customers are not necessarily seeing huge differences in how they do payments. There are people still use checks, people still use cash, people still use credit cards, and things like mobile payments are not really gaining a lot of traction in the U.S. So there was a lot of discussion about how the innovation's actually happening more at the customer experience. So things like Uber and Lyft, are impacting how payments are used.
Right.
But they didn't set out to change payments. They just set out to change customer experiences.
Huh, interesting.
And from a corporate standpoint, actually, we spent a lot of time talking about the corporate side. Real-time payments is something that both banks and the treasurers are looking to do, and trying to understand what products banks are going to bring to the treasury side of corporate customers, and how that's going to impact the world. And so right now in the U.S., we're kind of going through that, trying to figure out how we productize real-time payments and how that's going to impact our commercial customers. So that was a pretty good discussion around that.
Yeah, very, very interesting thing. And I really appreciate the point that you made with regard using the Uber example and the customer experience, that anybody who gets into an Uber feels as if the payment experience has changed, even if they're using the same credit cards process, but that experience is so transformative, especially the first few times you do it, that you really do feel like you're in a different paradigm.
Yeah, but the innovation's not happening at the rails.
Exactly.
The innovation's happening elsewhere.
Right.
So even if you say Apple Pay is an innovation, we're still using the credit card or the debit card to drive that. So we're not really making fundamental changes to it. There was a question of what is overhyped, and all of us agreed the blockchain is overhyped, particularly for payments. There are solutions, particularly foreign exchange and remittances, foreign remittances, that make a lot of sense. But for domestic and regular transactions, it's not something that we're seeing as being viable yet, and there's just way too much hype about blockchain right now.
Oh, is there ever something else? And we're hearing a little bit more of that tomorrow, I suspect, as well, as we talk on some of our cryptocurrencies and such. But excellent, really nice sitting and talking to you.
Great.
Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Like I said, I know we're keeping you busy today, so I'm glad we were able to steal you away for just a few minutes to talk both about payments and platformization, whatever we mean by it.
Yeah.
So, great. Wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for joining us at FinovateSpring 2018. Again, thank my guest, Alex Jimenez, and we will see you next time.